Before the first drum was struck in the festivals of men, before monsoon winds learned the name of the coast, there was a temple that seemed carved out of midnight. Its pillars rose like quiet trees, its courtyard smelled of sandalwood and rain, and its sanctum held a god whom even the stars addressed with caution. His name was Varunesh. His skin was the color of deep water. 12 hands circled him like a living halo, each palm a vow: to make, to mend, to defend, to forgive. Varunesh kept the balances that no mortal eyes could see. When a child laughed, he weighed the light of it against an old grief somewhere far away. When a river swelled, he taught the river to remember its banks. His gaze was gentle, yet wide enough to hold an age. He had never desired, not in the way that bound mortals to the sweet heat of life. He simply was, as the ocean simply is. Then Amara came to the temple. She was not a princess, not a priestess, only a healer with quick hands and a voice that knew how to soothe. She brought garlands for those who had no one to bring them. She tied red threads for sailors who feared the tide. She sang while sweeping the courtyard, and the dust rose in small glittering clouds that seemed to listen. Her presence tugged at the edges of the divine, like a quiet tide taking hold of the moon. One evening the lamps burned low, and the peacocks cried from the eaves. Amara placed a bowl of milk at the threshold and whispered a prayer for a child who slept too lightly. Varunesh stepped from the hush beyond the idol, not as thunder, not as blaze, but as a blue flame that became a man. His many hands folded back into two, the way a river finds a single channel in summer. Amara did not startle. She bowed, yes, though her eyes rose quickly to meet his. There was wonder in them, and something firmer than wonder. It felt like recognition, as if an echo had finally found its source. "You should not have come," he said, and the walls breathed with his voice. "Then why did you answer?" she asked. So the god and the healer sat on the steps while the moon climbed the temple tower. They spoke of small things first, and the small things opened into larger ones. He learned how she tied herbs with cotton thread to draw heat from a fever. She learned how he kept the horizon steady so sailors would not lose courage. When dawn slipped its pale hand over the eastern hills, a change had already begun. It was slow as a seed, sure as a tide. Varunesh felt the weight of the world tilt by a hair toward a single human heart. Days folded into weeks, and the temple became a place of whispers. Villagers said the god's statue glowed brighter when Amara was near. Some swore they saw shadows moving behind her when she prayed, not dark ones, but gentle, rippling shapes like the reflections of unseen hands. Amara ignored the murmurs. Her visits grew longer. She spoke less to others and more to the silence that waited beyond the altar. Varunesh, who had once counted stars as one counts breaths, began to count her footsteps instead. Every sound of her anklets drew a tide within him. He wondered how a being made of water and light could feel the slow ache of longing, a pulse that tethered him to mortal fragility. Yet he welcomed it, for in her voice he heard something he had forgotten existed among gods: humility, the kind that does not bow, but listens. When Amara fell ill, the first to notice were the temple birds. They did not sing at dawn. The peacocks hid their eyes from the sun. By evening, her laughter had faded, replaced by the faint rhythm of coughs. She tried to keep her hands steady, still healing others, but her skin turned pale, like the ghost of moonlight on water. From his celestial realm, Varunesh felt her weakening thread tremble on the loom of existence. No mortal illness, he realized, could reach her alone. This was the mark of divine imbalance, a sickness woven by forces jealous of his descent among humans. He summoned the winds of the upper sky. The clouds gathered, trembling beneath his anger. "Which of you," he thundered, "has touched what is mine to protect?" But the heavens remained silent. Only the old god of disease, shrouded in mists, whispered across the firmament, "Love is not yours to keep, Varunesh. You blurred the line between our kind and theirs. She bears the cost." Varunesh's rage shook the seas, yet beneath it lay a wound: fear. For the first time, the eternal god feared time itself. That night he appeared beside Amara, sitting quietly by her bed. Her chamber smelled of jasmine and wet clay. "You came," she murmured. Her eyes were half closed, but her lips still carried the curve of a smile. "I never left," he said, his voice breaking like surf against stone. "Tell me what to do." She reached up, touching his blue face with trembling fingers. "Even gods cannot mend what they cannot understand," she whispered. "But you will try, won't you?" He pressed her hand between both of his, all 12 of them. "I will walk the realms of gods and demons alike if it means your breath returns to you." And the lamps around them flickered, bowing to a promise that shook the pillars of creation. The next morning, before the first light touched the spires of the temple, Varunesh ascended to the celestial summit, the meeting place of gods, where time moved in circles instead of lines. The air there shimmered with the hum of eternity. He bowed before the Council of Radiance, ancient beings who guarded the laws of heaven since the dawn of breath. "I come to ask for the Elixir of Continuance," he said. "A drop of its light can restore what fate has begun to erase." The eldest among them, a goddess with hair of flame and eyes of obsidian, rose slowly. "You ask for what is forbidden," she said. "No mortal may taste the drink of immortals. The balance you yourself swore to protect would shatter." Varunesh's voice trembled between pride and desperation. "I will bear the burden. I will surrender my own divinity if need be." But she, his voice softened. "She carries the kind of light that even gods have forgotten." The council turned to silence. For a long moment, only the sound of cosmic sand flowed through the hourglass of the heavens. Finally, the goddess of flame nodded. "The elixir rests beyond the gates of dusk, guarded by the deities of chaos. If you take it, the sun may falter, the moon may bleed. But the choice is yours, Varunesh." He did not hesitate. With a bow that shook the constellations, he departed. Through realms unspoken and skies unbreathed, Varunesh traveled. The river of memory tried to drown him in visions of what could never be. The forest of whispers tempted him with voices of other gods who had fallen for mortal faces, voices that ended in regret and ash. Yet his resolve burned brighter with every step. At last, he reached the gates of dusk. There, beneath an arch of collapsing stars, stood the twin guardians, towering beings of obsidian and flame, their arms spanning the horizon. "Turn back," said one. "The elixir belongs to none who love." "Then I am none," Varunesh replied. The first guardian struck, fire against water. The second tore at him with claws made of night. Varunesh fought as the sea itself, relentless, mourning, divine. Each of his 12 hands moved with the fury of a storm and the grace of prayer. When the last spark of battle dimmed, the guardians bowed and stepped aside, their anger dissolved into reverence. Beyond them, on a pedestal of starlight, floated a single vial, glowing with soft, golden luminescence. Varunesh lifted it carefully. In that light, he saw Amara's face, her breath faint, her lips forming his name in the distance of his heart. He turned and began his descent toward the mortal world, unaware that time below had already bent in sorrow. The descent from heaven was not a fall, but a slow unraveling of eternity. Each step Varunesh took stripped a layer of his divinity away. The stars that once obeyed his gesture dimmed one by one. His 12 arms, once radiant with power, grew weary, turning the color of fading dusk. By the time his feet touched the dust of the mortal world, he was no longer infinite, only a god disguised in exhaustion and hope. The skies above Shadow Vale darkened, even though it was noon. The villagers gathered outside their homes, staring upward as strange lights flickered between clouds. In the temple courtyard, the peacocks cried again, for they knew the god was returning, not in triumph, but in love's quiet desperation. Varunesh hurried through the streets, carrying the vial that shimmered like trapped sunrise. With every heartbeat, its glow dimmed. "Hold on, Amara," he whispered into the wind. "I am coming." When he reached her dwelling, the air itself refused to move. The lamps were still lit, but their flames stood frozen, unbending. He found her lying upon white sheets embroidered with marigolds, her skin pale as moon milk. Her chest rose faintly, too faintly. He knelt beside her. "Amara," he breathed, the sound nearly breaking the silence of the room. "I have brought what even the gods forbid." Her eyelids fluttered open. "Varunesh," she murmured, "you shouldn't have." He uncorked the vial, and the air filled with light so pure it cast shadows where none had ever been before. A single drop fell upon her lips, glowing like a fragment of dawn, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The marigolds on the sheets brightened. The lamps flickered. Her hand twitched. Varunesh dared to hope. But then the glow turned pale. The drop of golden light sank into her skin, but her breathing did not return. Her pulse faded like a note too soft to be heard. "No," he whispered. "No, not now. Not when I." He tried to pour the rest of the elixir, but the vial was already empty, its light spent. His many hands trembled as he lifted her. The weight of her mortal body was heavier than any mountain he had ever held afloat. He carried her outside to the steps of the temple, where the wind had stilled. Above them, the clouds parted just enough to let the faintest ray of sunlight touch her face. "Forgive me," he said, pressing his forehead against hers. "I fought gods and storms, but I could not fight time." The breeze stirred gently, as if the world exhaled its sorrow. Her head rested against his chest, and in that stillness, she took her final breath. The light around them shattered, dawn breaking into 1,000 silent fragments. For a long while, the blue god did not move. He sat upon the temple steps with Amara in his arms, and the wind dared not cross that sacred stillness. His eyes, once filled with the endless reflection of the heavens, now held only the faint shimmer of tears, a thing no god had ever known how to shed. When at last one drop fell, the earth trembled. Where it touched the stone, a single lotus bloomed, white as sorrow and bright as forgiveness. More tears followed, quiet and unending, and from each one grew a flower. Soon the steps were covered in blossoms that glowed softly in the dim light, a silent field of grief and love intertwined. From the mountains, the other gods watched. Some turned away, uneasy at the sight of divinity brought to mourning. Others whispered among themselves that such love was too human, too fragile. Yet the eldest of them all, the goddess of flame, looked on with pity. "Let him grieve," she said. "Even we must learn what we command." Varunesh remained there through the passing of suns and moons, unmoving, unbreathing, as if guarding the fragile peace that lingered around her still body. The villagers, at first afraid, began to leave offerings, garlands, incense, a single clay lamp that never seemed to extinguish. One night, beneath a sky drenched in silver, he heard her voice, not in sound, but in memory. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You came back." He lifted his head. The world felt lighter, and for the first time, the air smelled of rain again. He laid her gently upon the earth, arranging marigolds around her as she once did for others. Then he stood, and as he rose, light followed. The god spoke to him from the clouds. "Varunesh, the order has been broken. You gave the elixir to mortal hands. The balance must be restored." He looked to the heavens with eyes that no longer feared them. "Then take from me what balance demands," he answered. "But let her rest in peace." Lightning split the sky, not in wrath, but in sorrow. The god of balance was lifted in a column of light that burned neither hot nor cold. His body dissolved into hundreds of shimmering threads, scattering across the horizon like rain of stars. When the last of him faded, the temple bells rang on their own, and the air whispered his name, Varunesh, over and over, until dawn came again. In that dawn, the villagers saw that the temple's pool had turned the color of the deep ocean, and at its center floated a single lotus, still glowing blue. They called it the Tear of Varunesh, and it was said that whoever drank from its water would find peace and love lost, not because it would return, but because it had once been real. Centuries passed. The Temple of Varunesh became a legend carried by the monsoon winds. Pilgrims came from distant lands to see the lotus that never withered, the pool that mirrored both the sun and the stars at once. Some came seeking love, others forgiveness, and a few, understanding. None left unchanged. They said that on nights when the moon was perfectly round, a soft blue glow rose from the water, shaping itself into the faint outline of a god with many arms. He did not speak. He only looked toward the horizon, where sky met earth, as though still waiting for someone to return. In one such night, a young girl named Dia wandered into the temple. She had heard stories of the god who wept for love, stories told by grandmothers who mixed myth with memory. She came not to pray, but to see if gods could still feel. The moonlight wrapped the temple in silver. The lotus in the pool trembled, its petals opening wider than ever before. From its heart rose a quiet shimmer, like a breath long held. And there, just above the water, she saw them, two figures of light, standing hand in hand. The woman's form was slender, her hair long as the rivers of dawn. The man beside her shone with deep blue radiance, his eyes endless, his arms surrounding her like a song-given shape. For a heartbeat, they seemed as real as life itself. Then, as a cloud crossed the moon, they dissolved back into the water. Dia fell to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't know why she wept, perhaps because some stories were too true for words. She took a small cup, dipped it into the pool, and drank. The water was cool, but beneath it lingered warmth, a pulse like a heartbeat. For a moment, she felt the love that once shook the heavens, the grief that became peace, the sorrow that became creation. As dawn began to break, she whispered a prayer not written in any scripture. May every love, no matter how brief, find its way to eternity. Above her, the sky bloomed with the first light of morning, scattering golden hues across the temple stones. And in that light, just before the day claimed the stars, the faint laughter of a woman and the sigh of a blue god drifted through the air, like music remembered from another world. The lotus closed its petals, the water stilled, and the world, for a moment, was perfectly balanced.